Now at 10, the BBC News with Sophie Raworth.
Tonight at 10, one of the greatest footballers of all time, the Brazilian legend Pelé, has died at the age of 82. The only player to have won the World Cup 3 times, Pelé burst onto the international scene at the age of just 17.
And it's Pelé! He's got it! Pelé has scored!
He dominated the game in a career that spanned more than 2 decades. Tonight, tributes have been pouring in from all around the world.
He was one of the great entertainers through his pure skill, talent and ability. And he was also a proven goalscorer.
Brazil's king is dead. I'm in Sao Paulo and the whole country is in mourning.
Also tonight, the death of another legend, a British fashion legend. The woman who put punk into fashion, Dame Vivienne Westwood, has died at the age of 81. The government is reviewing whether to bring in COVID restrictions for people travelling to the UK from China as restrictions there are eased. And the town in Canada that's been turned into ice by the biggest storm for decades. Good evening. Pelé, the Brazilian football legend, widely regarded as the greatest player of all time, has died at the age of 82. He'd been in hospital for several weeks being treated for cancer. During his 21-year-long career, he scored more than 1,200 goals in more than 1,300 appearances and became the only player to win the World Cup 3 times. In Brazil, he is hailed as a national hero for his achievements in football and for his repeated calls to improve the social conditions of the poor. Tonight, tributes to him have been pouring in from all corners of the world. Our sports editor, Dan Rowan, reports on the life of one of the true greats.
He's been sparring for an opening. It's all very canny stuff. Rivellino, and it's Pelé! He's got it! Pelé has scored! And that is Brazil's 100th goal in the World Cup.
If football is the world's game, then Pelé was the world's greatest player. For most fans, that's a statement of fact. Well over 1,000 goals, a career of over 20 years, and 3 times a World Cup winner. But don't just look at statistics, look at the style.
Oh, what genius! And he's missing! Oh, what a fabulous bit of dummy selling!
Brazilian football, synonymous with flair and success, was built on Pelé. Having been born into poverty, in 1958 he took part in his first World Cup tournament, aged just 17. He scored 6 goals in 4 matches, playing himself to the point of exhaustion. When Brazil beat Sweden in the final, one opponent said when he watched Pelé, he felt like applauding.
Pelé! And number 3.
Injury limited his role in the 1962 World Cup, and in 1966 glory was destined for elsewhere. Opposing teams knew they had to stop Pelé one way or another. 4 years later, in 1970 in Mexico, Pelé was part of a Brazilian team widely regarded as the finest ever. They won the World Cup with a freedom of expression and fluency never seen before. It was Pelé's last World Cup. Without him, Brazil waited another 24 years before winning the trophy again. Pelé remained in demand. After all, he was one of the most famous names and faces in the world. He spent 18 years with one club, Santos, averaging nearly a goal a game. By 1975, he was in the United States, the ultimate acquisition for a new league hungry for glamour. The league didn't last, but Pelé still thrilled New York. After football, he took on ambassadorial roles, commercial opportunities, politics, and naturally collected recognition. This Lifetime Achievement Award from the BBC, just one example. Pelé expressed no regrets.
If I have to do everything again, since I was born until now, I will do everything again, and I thank God.
Pelé had been receiving treatment for colon cancer for some time, and amid reports that his condition was worsening, his presence was felt throughout Brazil's campaign at the recent World Cup in Qatar. Last week, his daughter posted this update from her father's bedside in hospital in Sao Paulo. And tonight she confirmed his death, saying, "Everything we are is thanks to you."
He's unquestionably one of the greatest football players that's ever lived. And you have to be a certain age, of course, and I'm one of those people that were lucky enough to see him. My first World Cup I remember was 1970, that brilliant Brazilian side that he was the star of. And he had a profound effect on my love of football.
The popularity of football, the very idea of what makes it entertaining, began more than with any other man. Edson Arantes do Nascimento, simply Pelé.
Well, tonight the arch at Wembley Stadium has been lit up in the colours of Brazil as tributes pour in to the man many called the King. The French football star Kylian Mbappe said the king of football has left us, but his legacy will never be forgotten. And the Brazilian star Neymar said Pelé turned football into art, into entertainment. He gave voice to the poor, visibility to Brazil. Our sports correspondent Joe Wilson reports on the reaction to his death.
You didn't need to meet Pelé to feel that you knew him. Anyone with the slightest connection to football, with the slenderest interest in sport, grew up with Pelé's image, with his reputation. Many visited the museum. Some remember the matches. Among Pelé's contemporaries were some of England's most famous players, like Gordon Banks, like another England World Cup winner, Sir Geoff Hurst. He wrote on social media, "I have so many memories of Pelé. Without doubt, the best footballer I ever played against, with Bobby Moore the best footballer I played alongside. For me, Pelé remains the greatest of all time, and I was proud to be on the pitch with him. R.I.P. Pelé, and thank you." And here are some tributes from today's brightest stars. Lionel Messi wrote simply, "Rest in peace, Pelé." Cristiano Ronaldo said, "The love you always showed me was reciprocated in every moment we shared, even from distance. He will never be forgotten, and his memory will live forever in each and every one of us football lovers." In Brazil, Pelé's nearest current equivalent is Neymar. From him, I would say before Pelé, football was just a sport. Pelé has changed everything. He turned football into art, into entertainment. He gave a voice to the poor, to black people, and mostly gave visibility to Brazil. The deep respect spans generations, it spans sports too. When Usain Bolt describes Pelé as a sporting legend, the word has the context it truly deserves. What Pelé stood for and still represents is joy. Without that, what is sport? His career took football from black and white images to its fullest, boldest colours, to its global status. Why else would Wembley's arch be changed to the colours of Brazil, of joy, the colours of Pelé? Joe Wilson, BBC News.
Our South America correspondent Katie Watson is outside the hospital in Sao Paulo where Pelé died earlier today. And Katie, tell us more about the reaction there in Brazil.
Well, this was a moment that every Brazilian knew was going to happen, but at the same time, of course, dreaded. And behind me, where he died just a few hours ago, there's press from around the world. There are also fans who have come to pay their respects. The hospital issued a statement saying that it shared with the family and everyone else the suffering that comes with the loss of our beloved king of football. I just think that shows the mark of respect that everybody here had for Pelé. Even Lula, who will be becoming president of Brazil at the weekend, he said there was no number 10 shirt like him. I think whether you were young or old, whether you remembered him playing or whether you were told by your parents or your grandparents about how he played, he was an icon for everyone. And in this country, which has been so divided politically, he was above that. He was above politics. He really was a king for people here in Brazil.
Katie, thank you. And let's get a final word from our sports editor, Dan Roan, who's at the BBC Sports Centre in Salford. And just give us an idea. I mean, we've got one already, but how Pelé will be remembered.
I think for many, Sophie, as quite simply the greatest. This was a man whose skill, but also his smile, came to define not just the Brazil national team, but also the World Cup and indeed the sport itself. But I think Pelé transcended football because, remember, decades after his retirement, he remained one of the most famous people in any walk of life on the planet. Despite the difficulty of comparing legends from different eras, inevitably there'll always be that debate around who was the greatest, and in particular, of course, comparisons with his fellow South American Diego Maradona. What's undeniable, however, is that no one can match those 3 World Cup victories that Pelé was part of. He remains the youngest ever goal scorer in a World Cup final. His prolific scoring for both club and country is quite remarkable. I think such statistics don't do justice to his skill and technique, which were years ahead of its time. But also it's worth considering that the image of a beaming Pelé in the gold of Brazil came to embody, I think, for many people, that concept of the beautiful game. But also I think it gave Brazil a national identity. He arguably did more than any other player to ensure that that was the country that for many was most closely associated with football, the country that became known as the one that was most in love with football. Consider also the fact that he was born just 52 years after Brazil abolished slavery. He became one of the first black global sporting superstars. He was vocal about the need for greater education in his country as well. It's testament to the impact that he made, the outpouring of tributes this evening. But I think for many football fans around the world, it's the skill above all and the smile that will define this player. He was known as the King, and it does seem a very fitting nickname given the majesty of his skill. And I think for many, he will be more than any other footballer, the player who made the game beautiful.
Our sports editor, Dan Roan, thank you. Well, tonight the death has been announced of another legend, the British fashion designer Dame Vivienne Westwood. She was 81. She died today surrounded by her family in South London. Her husband, who was also her creative partner, said they had been working until the end and she had given him plenty of things to get on with. Vivienne Westwood made a name for herself in the 1970s as she started out on London's King's Road, putting punk into fashion. She became one of British fashion's biggest names. Sarah Campbell looks back at her life.
I am an anti-coaster. I am an anarcho-coaster. Don't know what I want, but I know how to get it. I want to destroy.
She gave birth to punk, conquered the catwalk and built a global fashion empire. A grammar school girl from Glossop in Derbyshire, Vivienne Westwood was a would-be revolutionary who both shocked and inspired, transforming British fashion.
The trousers all come with a little loincloth on the back. Everybody wants to know what that's for. It's just a loincloth, it's just a gesture.
Her empire started here, a shop on London's King's Road. She, along with her creative partner Malcolm McLaren, dressed the Sex Pistols and made bondage gear and swastika trousers fashion must-haves.
I think it's very sane for young people to be angry. And that is what we were doing, and I wanted this look of an urban guerrilla, and that's what we were after.
In the 80s, she moved from London to the Paris catwalks, initially with McLaren and then on her own. The fashionistas loved her.
You have to go where you have to go, you have to do what you have to do, and I certainly don't want to be underground. I want to be at a place of the most focus that I can find.
She used traditional fabrics, such as Harris tweed, and designs from the history books. The supermodels of the day wanted to show for her, even when asked to walk in 9-inch platforms. This fall only added to Naomi Campbell's fame. The general public found some of her designs somewhat baffling. Ms Westwood was bemused by the reaction from this television audience in the late 80s.
If they don't stop laughing, I shall tell the next person not to come on.
Oh dear, you're not to laugh.
But so many of her ideas ended up on the high street, it was she who would have the last laugh. And she wasn't just passionate about clothing. She regularly used her profile to push causes she supported. This tank would end up outside David Cameron's house.
I declare war on fracking!
Ever the rebel, she chose not to wear any knickers while receiving her OBE from the Queen. That didn't stop her being made a dame in 2006. When Sex and the City's iconic character Carrie Bradshaw needed a wedding dress, she turned to Vivienne Westwood.
My maxim, if in doubt, dress up. Don't ever dress down, you'll be so disappointed.
God save the Queen!
Her influence as a designer spanned 5 decades. She was both a commercial and critical success, managing to rise up the ranks of the establishment without abandoning her anti-establishment credentials.
The fashion designer Dame Vivienne Westwood, who has died at the age of 81. Well, I'm joined now by our correspondent Angus Crawford, and her death was only announced an hour or so ago. But she was a woman who had an extraordinary impact, wasn't she?
Incredible, and possibly the most poignant tribute so far is from her husband, Andreas Kronthaler, who said, "We have been working until the end, and she has given me plenty of things to get on with." Former Green Party leader and MP Caroline Lucas gave a tribute tonight. She said she was such a legend, a huge inspiration, and always a committed activist for people and planet. Rough trade record, hugely influential in her life, described her as the mother of punk, non-conformist, original icon. Jonathan Ross, DJ, TV presenter, described her as unique, brilliant, uncompromising. Thanks, Viv. And Chrissie Hynde, very famous musician, obviously, has said tonight that the world is already a less interesting place. I mean, an extraordinary journey from working-class Derbyshire girl to Dame Vivienne Westwood, the godmother of punk.
Angus, thank you. The government says it is keeping the situation around people arriving from China very much under review. Travel restrictions are finally being eased in China despite a surge in coronavirus. EU health officials have been meeting today to discuss their response to an expected influx of visitors from China in the next few weeks. Well, our medical editor Fergus Walsh is here. Fergus.
Thanks, Sophie. The sudden lifting of China's zero COVID policy after nearly 3 years has allowed the virus to let rip across an under-immunised population with little natural immunity. That's worried neighbouring countries including Japan, South Korea and India, who've imposed COVID checks on arrivals from China. The US has followed suit, saying a lack of adequate and transparent data from China was partly behind its decision to require a negative COVID test. Italy is the only European country to impose checks, including a post-arrival PCR test, which will allow genomic surveillance of potential new COVID threats. The outbreak in China is being driven by several Omicron subvariants, including BF7, which has already been circulating in the UK. The latest COVID estimates for the UK earlier this month were that around 1 in 45 people had the virus. That probably means 1 million people a week are getting infected, so there is plenty of COVID about here. But most of the UK population is very well protected from severe illness via a combination of vaccines and repeated natural infection, meaning COVID, while still a potential danger here, is no longer the threat it once was. Sophie.
Fergus, thank you. A third person has been arrested over the murder of a 26-year-old woman on Merseyside on Christmas Eve. Ellie Edwards was shot dead at a pub in Wallasey and 4 other men were left injured, one of them critically. A 31-year-old man is being held on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Police have been given more time to question 2 other people, a man and a woman, who were detained earlier this week. A third man has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Cody Fisher, who was stabbed to death on Boxing Day at a nightclub event in Birmingham. West Midlands Police said a knife had been found and it had applied for the nightclub's licence to be reviewed. 4 other people have been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. Russia has launched a fresh wave of missile strikes on Ukraine in one of the biggest bombardments since the start of the war. The Ukrainian authorities say about 70 missiles were launched from air and sea. Many were intercepted, but dozens did hit towns and cities across Ukraine, knocking out power supplies. Hugo Beshega reports from Kyiv.
On the outskirts of Kyiv, tears and anger. Tatiana lives far from the front lines. But this morning, war has come to her. Her house was hit when Russia launched another barrage of airstrikes. She shows us the renovation work they had just done.
My granddaughter was in this bedroom and you can see what happened. It's a very difficult feeling when you're just waiting for the next attack to happen.
Tatiana's husband was in the next room when the ceiling fell around him.
I went deaf for a while. Everything started to crumble around me. I ran outside and found my daughter screaming.
We still don't know what happened. This crater was likely the point of impact, and the power of the blast destroyed these cars and all the houses here, with personal belongings everywhere. 3 people were injured, no one was killed. Russia's missiles and drones have brought scenes like this to places across this country.
But Kyiv's mayor says the attacks won't break people's determination to resist.
The Russians want to bring depression, especially right now, Christmas time, New Year. The Russians want to bring us to black time. Ukrainian people very angry, and they told better we stay without electricity, without heating, but we never give up.
And from Ukraine's spy chief, a warning: these attacks are unlikely to stop.
They will try to continue them. Can they do this for long? No, because they do not have many missiles left. Their defence industry is incapable of producing enough missiles to sustain the same scale of strikes. This is another reason they're trying to get missiles from other countries.
The strikes again have disrupted the lives of millions of Ukrainians. They've emerged from underground shelters, but wonder when and where the next attack will hit. Hugo Mashega, BBC News, Kyiv.
Tonight was the last opportunity this year to witness a rare phenomenon known as a planet parade. All the planets in our solar system were visible at the same time in the night sky. It happened just after sunset this evening. 5 of the planets were visible with the naked eye, and you could see the 2 that are furthest away, Uranus and Neptune, using binoculars. And finally, the powerful winter storm that has struck North America has turned this Canadian town of Fort Erie into an ice town, with these houses fully encased in ice. Temperatures have also fallen so low that parts of that Niagara Falls have frozen over. You can see the thick layers of ice and snow around the waterfall on the northeast border between the US and Canada. The storm brought more than 4 feet of snow in places, but slightly warmer weather is now on the way. Darren Beck can tell us more about the weather. He's here now. It's going to get a lot warmer, isn't it, in parts of North America?
Yes, it is a dramatic change in the weather, Sophie, from the bitter Arctic cold to temperatures actually above normal across the eastern side of North America. So we're seeing the ice and the snow melting. Now, here in the UK, we had a colder wind blowing today. It brought a mixture of sunshine and also some showers, but there's more cloud and more rain coming our way. And you can see all that cloud sweeping in from the Atlantic, and that's going to bring some wetter weather for many western and northern parts of the UK. But it's not just rain. Once again, it's cold enough over the hills in northern Scotland to see some snow here into tomorrow. Could be as much as 20 centimetres. Some rain overnight, an inch of rain in Northern Ireland, wetter than that in southern Scotland. And here we actually have an amber heavy rain warning from the Met Office. Given how wet it's been, and with another couple of inches of rain or more, there's likely to be some flooding and some travel disruption. It's not just wet in the morning for Scotland, it's wet across England and Wales. That rain sweeps away eastwards out into the North Sea, so we get some improvements in the afternoon. Turns brighter, some sunshine, showers continue in Northern Ireland and push into Scotland, where it may turn a bit drier in the far north, but still cold here. Those are the sort of temperatures we're looking at overnight, so it will be a bit warmer than that during the day. Heading into Saturday, we've got some cloudy, wetter weather to come, again, mainly across England and Wales, where it will be particularly wet across southern parts of the UK. Some patchy rain for southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, but a bit colder further north, where we could see a few wintry showers. Very mild, though, in East Anglia and the southeast, 15 degrees. That's not a record, though. Take you back to last New Year. Temperatures reached 17 degrees, the warmest New Year on record. We're not far away from that in some areas, but with that milder weather comes some more wet weather, and the details probably changing a bit as we head into New Year's Day, because we've got this rain moving its way further north across Scotland and Northern Ireland, some snow over the hills in Scotland, and then lots of showers following for England and Wales, where those temperatures are still up to 12 Celsius. Sophie.
Darren, thank you very much. And that is it from us on Thursday, the 29th of December. The news continues here on BBC One, because it's now time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Good night.